you had to be a court. It was where everything happened. Courts were moving, traveling cities. If you weren't in court, you just didn't exist. You were a peasant. You lived in the countryside. You can see all these dukes and all these earls, and they're all at court, and they all had apartments within the court, or used to rent little townhouses around the palace. They had beautiful estates, some of them matching Henry's, out in the countryside, but never got there. Because if you were out at your estate, you were either banished, ill, or nobody wanted to see you. Or you were out of favour with the king, which is the worst thing to be. So everything revolved around the king. So, was Henry like a rock star? Of course he was like a rock star. We throw sort of like rock stars, movie stars up there, and we treat them like gods in the same way as, Henry was treated. Wherever they are, that's where the party is. I think More knew Henry when he was very, very young, when he was a young boy, possibly tutored him, maybe. I'm not so sure if he did or not. But Henry would have looked up to More as a kind of an older brother figure that he didn't have. He was a man who was learned. His piety was never in question. His own sense of morals were correct. His own sense of propriety was there. And Henry admired him. He admired More. More was all the good in the world, in many ways. But be careful in thinking that's all More is, because More's got his own demons. Any man who finds he has to exist in that depth of piety is frightened of something, or is fighting something. Whereas Wolsey is totally different. Without scruples. Wolsey is corrupt, so Henry doesn't have to be. Wolsey gets great wealth. He builds Oxford. His great swan song is building Oxford, and it's quite a swan song. He was incredibly wealthy. He had a lot of power. He had a mistress. I think he fathered 2 children. Now, I might be incorrect, but I think he did. And he made a mistake. He made a mistake, and his mistake was not getting Henry the divorce, but promising Henry something that he couldn't give to him. Henry had no choice but get rid of Wolsey. Wolsey backed himself into a corner, which he couldn't get out of. And when Henry was not granted the divorce by Rome, Wolsey failed him where he had promised him. But extraordinarily enough, very close to Wolsey's death, Henry met him, and he was at a banquet, and Henry walked him over to the window, and the last time they were seen together, they were seen laughing and joking with each other like old friends. So they had that element. He's very close to Wolsey as well, very close, and admires him. He doesn't refer to him in the same blackguard manner, I suppose, as, Richard Burton and Anthony Quayle, their relationship. Myself and Sam's is totally different. Richard Burton had this thing of, he was always calling him Vicar of Hell and illuminating his corruption. Whereas I play it differently and illuminate his piety whilst knowing he's corrupt. Henry's no fool. He knows what Wolsey does is not kosher. You don't cross the king, because even if he doesn't want to punish you, he has to, because you made him look a fool. And a king cannot look a fool. I think it was Henry had a fool, a jester, or a groom that used to lie across his doorway, like those snakes, so the wind doesn't come in. And Henry was in bed one night, and he's in his room and he's on his own, and he's trying to figure something out, and he can't get it. And the jester turns to him and says, which, my lord, would you rather be, the king of fools or the fool of kings? And Henry realizes that even if you really love somebody, including his sister, and they try to hurt you, you have to cut their heads off. They have to be gone. They have to be banished, even if it breaks your heart to do it. Even when he executes more, or executes Anne Boleyn, or Katherine being thrown in the tower, or Buckingham, although he secretly enjoyed Buckingham. But, you sometimes you have to kill the thing you love for your own survival. And that's another very, very hard thing that people in these days, we don't really realize that, imagine, growing up. I suppose there's some that do. Someone like, Prince William or Prince Harry. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, I always read stories about Harry in the newspaper. He's out, he's getting drunk, he's kissing girls, he's falling out of nightclubs at 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, so he's doing the same thing as every 22 or 23-year-old kid out there is doing. Unfortunately, though, he can't, because he's not a normal human being. He's a demigod, because he's a royal. But that's in this day. Well, you can imagine what it was like 500 years ago. You are a god. I mean, if you told peasants in the field that you walked on water, they believe you. So, there's a lot of power to have, but it does restrict you. It's kind of like, it's like putting all this energy in a little ball. And sometimes that ball is going to bounce very hard against something, you know what I mean? And he does. He bounces hard against Anne Boleyn.